So Kalero, it is very strategically located between the deltas of Godavari and Krishna, one of the most beautiful wetlands that I've seen. And whenever these two deltas flood, the water will connect in Kolero, and becomes a very good, flood buffer. And groundwater availability in the coast, fresh water is very scarce. So that is where it sustained a very rich fisheries, and thereby an important population of open billed stocks. In fact, Asia's largest pelicanry of open billed stocks was in Colero. But gradually, human greed took over, and the entire wetland was converted into fish tanks, cultured fish tanks. And there were numerous ones. And when I went there in 2004-5, everybody and anybody, what's their name in politics or money, had a fish tank. So what's wrong with having fish tanks in wetland, you should ask, because the entire country eats Andhra fish. The Colero fish. Colero fish goes out to everyone. Every restaurant in this country today, when it serves you fish, there is a high likelihood that it comes from Colero. Now, natural wetlands are not meant to do just one system alone. Right. So as a human being, you are just not meant to be on your computer 24 hours a time. You have to go out, you have to play, you are a parent, you are a teacher, you have multiple functions, and wetlands are multifunctional systems. So in a natural system, they will recharge groundwater, they will do flood buffering, carbon sequestration, and also they can give you fish and agriculture, but not like an industry. When we convert it to an industry, so Colero, for example, over 250 kilometers road length is sitting inside the wetland to create these small tanks. So what happens? Water becomes fragmented. Rather than one continuous sheet of water, it is now a sheet of tanks. So it cannot no longer buffer, because for buffering you need a large storage space. Now these are small storage spaces, and since the cultured fish has to be protected, they cannot escape from one tank to the other tank. Water movement is not allowed, and then it becomes a hotbed of pollution. So all kinds of pollutants and chemical fertilizers and pesticides that are used by fish culture industry, they get locked up in the system and becomes toxic. And socially, it is also very disruptive, because people who had big monies from Hyderabad and all these places, they were the owners of these tanks. But the original owners of the wetland, they are still laborers there. They get a very small pittance out of the wetland. So now, as the hydrology becomes very volatile, if you have large floods in Iluru and everywhere, imagine your buffer is now gone. Your basic protection is gone, and unless we and this is not just the wetland, it is the tributaries as well. They need to, so Pudumeru, Ramiluru, these were small tributaries that used to connect to the wetland, and everywhere we now have hydraulic structures to control flow of water. So that's why we have to allow the tributaries to talk to the wetland, right? So we have to allow the veins and arteries to connect to our brain and heart and lungs. That is how a landscape is a living one. It's a living landscape. So we'll have to clean up our tributaries, allow water to flow towards the wetland, talk to the wetlands, and this recycling will improve its health. Unfortunately, everybody is bothered about fish. We are just looking at fish economy. We are not having a longer term view of what a healthy system can provide, the biodiversity that it can sustain. And that has led to rapid decline of Kulleru. Unfortunately, Kulleru is also a Ramsar site. I talked about initially in my remarks that there was an international agreement around wetlands. So that agreement is called Ramsar Convention. Ramsar because it's a town in Iran, on the coast to the Caspian Sea. So when you become a party to the Ramsar Convention, you have to designate wetlands to the list of wetlands of international importance. So this is a global network of wetlands which, when conserved, can sustain global diversity of life, and also about people. So worldwide, there are about 2,800 wetlands that are put to the list, and India has 46 wetlands to the list. There are at least 6 more proposals. So Indian, network of Ramsar sites is the largest in South Asia. Now, Kolero is also on that list. So what happens when you put the wetland on the list? firstly, you commit to conserve the wetland, and second, you give an international commitment to ensure its wise use. Now, what is wise use? Wetlands are not protected areas 100%, so they need not be locked up. We can permit certain uses of wetlands which do not alter its natural character. So you can do agriculture in wetlands, you can do fishing in wetlands as long as you don't add pesticides, you don't add chemical fertilizers, you don't change the hydrology, you don't change the water inflow and outflow pattern, you don't disturb the species. If you can ensure um, ensure all of this, all of these conditions, then you can use the wetland. So Kolero is a classical case of unwise use. We have done everything, and I often say, just for getting more fish on the plate, we have destroyed a living ecosystem, which was a critical water source for the region. And Supreme Court was also very terse. Every law agency of the country, law institution of the country has been very terse on the situation in Kolero. But unfortunately, wetlands figure very low in politics. People are seeing and lives we are seeing employment, but they are not looking at sustainability. You can't sustain, the fishing system will collapse. Several places where industrial, fishing or culture fish, continuous culture fishing is done, you get, swaths of diseases. If you are on antibiotics for long, the system becomes very vulnerable. The diversity, because the entire culture is about 3 to 4 species alone, the diversity is completely lost. And to sustain just 3 or 4 species monocultures, you need to invest a lot of chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticides, insecticides, antibiotics. The water residues from Kolero are amazingly bad. That means health consequences for the fish, health consequences for the people. So it's a sad story. Four onwards till 2006, and I continue, interacting with the governments on Kolero uh, in indirect ways. I keep a tab on the system. So, but the management plan was never implemented. We had given several recommendations. I think even stalwarts as Dr. Patanjali Shastri had very clear recommendations on what could be done on Kulleru. So, but governments have decided not to listen to scientists, not to listen to experts, and at their own peril. Because in one time, politics may have a 5-year lifespan, but ecosystems, once they're degraded in the landscape, they hit back. I will give you example of another example in Kashmir, in Srinagar. So I was working on Bular, and I realized that wetland had shrunk by over 50%. People had taken land out of that wetland for agriculture and everything. And then we said that, we need to secure Bular not for the region alone. It is a flood buffer for Srinagar. Any excess rainfall in Srinagar, Wular is the place where it is absorbed. And the moment we kill the Wular Lake, Srinagar will be underwater in more times. And look at what happened in 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18. In those days, conserving Wular would have costed no more than 200, 250 odd crores. Today, the flood damages alone run into thousands and thousands of crores. Huge waste of public money. So if we are conscious of our ecosystems, because every time floods these days, look at Chennai floods, for example, 2014-15, when our airport came underwater. The entire, if you just take at the number of wage days that were lost, but also look at the market capitalization, the way stock markets behave, the damage runs into lakh crores. The solution is pretty simple. You have to ensure Palai Karni is conserved. We have to ensure that our wetlands are alive. It's a small cost to pay for hungamus damages that floods are wreaking on our society these days. Everybody has a role to play in wetlands conservation. Wetlands are not just the responsibility of governments. It is our responsibility to ensure that wetlands are healthy. And for this, first of all, just step out of your room. Every time you open a tap of water and water flows in, always remember that this water is flowing in your glass because there was a healthy wetland bringing this to your tap. Every time you flush your toilet, always remember that this will end up in a wetland. And so we have to be water wise. First thing that we do as individually, then step out and find out where is the wetland in your locality. Know about it, talk about it to everyone. Ensure that these places are not dumped, encroached. Be a watchdog. Connect to a local NGO. Use your camera to photograph life around wetlands. Create interest around wetlands and participate in wetlands management. We have recently, Government of India is celebrating Bharat Ka Amrit Mahotsav, in which wetland mitras are being created all around the country. So you become your wetland mitra, and by becoming friend of the wetland, you will become an important stakeholder for wetlands conservation. So take it onto yourselves into conserving the fate of wetlands. If the wetlands are alive, water will continue flowing in the landscape. If the water disappears, we will have to blame ourselves for becoming a part and parcel of a lifestyle which was built on damaging wetlands for times to come. So it's time to bend the curve, and it is time to be conscious of our beautiful natural assets. Let's conserve wetlands while they are still in good health.